Welcome to a presentation on Log Cabin to White House. This is in conjunction with the special exhibition America to 53 Presidents, Lincoln, Grant, and Garfield. We'll be looking at three watercolor paintings by the artist Oscar Edmund Berninghaus, and they are of Abraham Lincoln at the upper left, Ulysses S. Grant at the upper right, and James A. Garfield at the lower center. Each of these represents a young man who would grow up to be President of the United States. And we'll look at the history of these works and background on the presidents and explore why Berninghaus chose to depict these three presidents and what meaning they might have had to him and his audience. The three choices of Lincoln, Grant, and Garfield seem to be a little unusual if we're thinking of great presidents that we've all known. We think of the presidents of Mount Rushmore: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln, and Theodore Roosevelt. And those four presidents are also highlighted by Steuben glass with their series on presidential plaques, being some of the best known and foundational presidents of the United States. But no, Berninghaus chose three other presidents, although Lincoln is in his series as well as in the canonical Mount Rushmore. Here are photographic portraits of each of the presidents at the time of each of their presidencies. Abraham Lincoln in 1863. He was the 16th president of the United States and, of course, served during the period of the Civil War. Ulysses S. Grant was the 18th president of the United States and served in the Reconstruction period. And James A. Garfield on the right was president in the post-Reconstruction period in the year 1881. Both Abraham Lincoln and James Garfield were assassinated. So that might be a linking factor, but Grant, however, was not. He lived through his presidency and time afterwards and died eventually of throat cancer. I looked at various factors that might unite these presidents because they're not in following chronological order. There are presidents in between them. One thing you'll notice from the photographs is that each man has a beard, which up until Lincoln's time was unusual for United States presidents. He grew a beard during his presidency. In fact, there is supposedly an old joke that after the Civil War, to be elected president, you needed to be a Republican, be a Union veteran, and have a beard. So the beards were recognized as being unique features, but I don't think that's the sufficient factor to unite these three presidents as the main choices. But I think other aspects, their roles as Republicans, the new party that was founded in the 1860s and became identified with the Union cause during the battle between the states, and that each of these men were associated with the Union during the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln serving as president, Ulysses S. Grant as the primary general of the U.S. Army and succeeding in defeating the Confederate forces, and James A. Garfield also served in the Union Army until he was elected to Congress. It's also significant to look briefly at the history of the artist who made the works. This is on Oscar E. Berninghaus. On the left is a portrait of the artist by a fellow artist, Ernest Martin Hennings. Berninghaus was born in St. Louis, Missouri, to immigrant parents. His parents immigrated to the United States from Germany. He was trained as a lithographer and established a successful career in St. Louis as an illustrator. In 1899, he visited Taos, New Mexico for the first time and was captivated by the area. And after that, he split his time for a while between Taos in the summers and work in New Mexico, working in New Mexico, and then in the winter times back to St. Louis. He's best known, of course, for his works and painted in Taos, New Mexico, such as the Fiesta Crowd, San Juan, New Mexico, on your left. One of his beautiful paintings of everyday scenes, in the sense that we see the life of the people gathering for a fiesta. We don't really recognize the festival itself, but we see the interaction of the natives and the tourists coming to witness, and all in Berninghaus's beautiful style, which feeds off the light of New Mexico. On the right is his painting, The Faithful Ponies, done it in 1918, a few years earlier, as an example of one of his sort of classic westerns influenced by the artist Frederick Remington, and showing kind of the Old West with the saloon and the horses out in front. But in addition to these scenes of Western life, in his career, Berninghaus also painted what we would call history paintings, and some of these were reproduced in a booklet entitled Epoch Marking Events of American History, a series of historical pictures. And this was published by the Anheuser-Busch company, the brewing company that made and continues to make beers such as Budweiser. Anheuser-Busch was located, or is located in St. Louis, Missouri, and Berninghaus did a number of projects for Anheuser-Busch and for the family. The historic pictures that he painted for Anheuser-Busch can be seen in works such as Laclede Landing at present site of St. Louis. The booklet had a number of paintings that Berninghaus had painted, and the company used as posters, and then they published the booklet with the intention of providing an educational tool for families, and it was actually aimed at children, and although it was an advertising tool for the beer company. In the essay that accompanies the Berninghaus's image of Laclede Landing at the site of St. Louis, it notes the history of the scene when Pierre Laclede came on the Mississippi River and found a site that eventually became St. Louis, starting with the fur trading post. But the essay as well brings the essay somewhat up to date. It points out subsequent history and concludes noting that St. Louis had a population of 186,000 at the opening of the Civil War, and it was one of the most important of the federal headquarters during the Civil War. And so these will be important connections to the series of presidential paintings that we are looking at. This booklet of epoch marking history scenes was done in 1914, which is about the same time as the three paintings that we will be looking at. The first is Abraham Lincoln, and Berninghaus portrayed Abraham Lincoln in a scene in front of a log cabin. It's shown in the distance, and Lincoln is in the position of splitting rails, splitting logs to make a rail fence, which you see being constructed, or one is in the middle ground of the painting. This shows the young Lincoln at work, and by also showing a log cabin in the background, it indicates literally Abraham Lincoln's background. He was born in a log cabin in Kentucky, and his family moved as well from Kentucky to Indiana to Illinois, constructing log cabins at different times. And Lincoln grew up basically in a family of very limited means. He himself had limited education, so he grew from a position of hard work and his character to ascend to the presidency of the United States. This small watercolor in the collection of the Stark Museum, we think, was done about 1914, and it's also related to a larger painting of Abraham Lincoln splitting logs that is now in the collection of the St. Louis Art Museum. So this painting was a gift to the St. Louis Art Museum from August A. Bush Jr., the grandson of the co-founder of the Anheuser-Busch Brewing Company. The painting was likely acquired from Berninghaus from his father, August A. Bush Sr. At this time in my research, this is still a work in progress. I hope to research further to understand the connection between Bush and Berninghaus as to whether Berninghaus painted this on speculation or if it was commissioned for a particular purpose, and the relationship between the oil painting and our watercolor in the museum collection. Both paintings are similar in using a very light color palette and with slight differences. The oil painting has more detail. It has more figures, such as the farm animals, not present in the watercolor. And the likeness of Abraham Lincoln is closer to his physical features. So it seems to be a more finished work, which is why I think the watercolor in the Stark Museum collection was preparatory work in planning for the oil painting version. But this definitely shows the association of Anheuser-Busch Company, the family that then ran it, the Bush family, with the theme of the three presidents. Since they owned the same series of three paintings in oil versions. In making his history paintings, scholars writing on Berninghaus have noted that he did do research in planning his works, and it's clear that he looked for special details, and in considering what might be the possible sources, one one series of books may have influenced Berninghaus. Again, more research would be necessary to establish these connections. But author William Makepeace Thayer in the 1880s wrote a series of books aimed at young boys and giving them literary examples to follow and to emulate. And he wrote books on men who became presidents, focusing on their childhood. And it's interesting that he called his series Log Cabin to White House, taking this idea of moving from very frontier background up to the residence of the United States presidency. Included in Thayer's series of books, he wrote one on the life of James Garfield, and the subtitle was literally From Log Cabin to White House. He wrote one on Abraham Lincoln, From Pioneer Home to White House, and one on Ulysses S. Grant, From Tannery to White House. And all three of these were in the series, although we did do others. But the fact that they were available might have been a source that Berninghaus could have accessed, in that Thayer's books were reprinted, but certainly the ideas that of the future presidents coming from adverse circumstances and overcoming them is a common theme that provided a moral exemplar to the reader in Thayer's books and the viewer in Berninghaus's paintings. Abraham Lincoln's birthplace log cabin no longer exists, but there is a site that commemorates his birthplace with a symbolic cabin that has been built and then enclosed in a memorial building, which you can visit in Kentucky. And the historic site today has a rail fence at the entrance to, again, associate that theme of the rail splitter. The association of Abraham Lincoln with the theme of From Log Cabin to White House continues to be relevant into the 20th and now 21st century. This is Steuben Glass's bowl of the state of Illinois as part of the series United States in Crystal, and it features Abraham Lincoln showing him with his axe as a rail splitter, and there are small reproductions or images of a log cabin and the exterior of the White House on the bowl. And you can see this in the hallway of this Stark Museum. The second painting in the series is of Ulysses S. Grant. And he is shown on a wagon sitting on a load of firewood, or cordwood as it was called. It was bound together in bundles. At this point, Abraham Lincoln was shown as a youth. Ulysses S. Grant in this painting is much more mature in age. The scene comes from his biography later in life. Thayer's book used as a subtitle From Tannery to White House, and actually Ulysses S. Grant worked in his father's tanning business, which was quite difficult work. But instead, Berninghaus chose to represent this scene of him selling firewood. And I think the reason he did that is because this is a scene from Grant's life when he was actually living in the St. Louis, Missouri area. By this time, Grant had actually gone to West Point and graduated from West Point, had gone into the Army, and had served in the Army, especially during the war with Mexico. But he, after the war, he de-enlisted from the Army and tried several occupations, none of which he was very successful at. He eventually settled in St. Louis, worked some farmland, but was reduced to selling firewood on the streets of St. Louis. And this seemed to be a particularly low point in Grant's history. He was not succeeding. So I think that we do still have the theme of adversity, although the painting as well is a lovely pastel watercolor, very bucolic. The wagon is paused, and Ulysses S. Grant is shown in a very relaxed position. And you can see when you look up close that he's smoking a pipe, and you see his red beard that he had at this point in his life. But I think it was because he was living in St. Louis at this time that it would have appealed to Berninghaus and to the potential patrons for this subject, the Bush family. Especially because the Bush family had a particular connection to Ulysses S. Grant's property, which I'll show in the next slide. Berninghaus also did an oil version of the Ulysses S. Grant painting, which was in the collection of the Bush family and was not donated to the St. Lawrence, to the St. Louis Art Museum. So I don't have a slide of it, and I hope in the future I'll be able to find a picture of it. But I want to make the connection with the log cabin. Ulysses S. Grant was not born in a log cabin like Abraham Lincoln and like James Garfield, who we will see. His family was not as poor as either the Lincolns or the Garfields. His father did have a tannery business and achieved a certain amount of success. Grant's period of adversity really was in his own life as he struggled to find a meaningful role. And at one point, he actually built a log cabin to live in with his wife and children. You see on the left a historic photo, although this is really after the family had left the cabin. This was done in the 1890s. On the right, you see a contemporary photograph of the cabin as it's been restored. Grant built this cabin himself, and of course had help from neighbors with the final construction. It was a point of pride for him to provide a house for his family, but they were never particularly happy there. The conditions were quite crude, and his wife, Julia, attempted to make it lovely with her furnishings, but they finally lived there only a few months before they moved back to another house owned by her family. But it shows Ulysses S. Grant's fortitude his ability to address the problems that he had and make a kind of living for himself. And he chose a log cabin because it was inexpensive to construct. Board labor was available, but using logs was more efficient and could be constructed more quickly. The family named the house Hardscrabble, a term that refers to land that's not easy to grow crops on, but it's also a term that became associated with difficult times of adversity. So you might have a hardscrabble childhood because you didn't have sufficient financial resources. Grant would go on from this to become a general of the U.S. Army during the Civil War, and then eventually successfully as President of the United States. The third president in the grouping is James A. Garfield, who also was born in a log cabin. And his father died when he was 2 years old. So the family was under severe financial concerns from a very young age. Garfield had to work, and one of the positions that he took was to be a canal boy, which meant that he guided the canals on the Ohio Canal. He guided the boats on the Ohio Canal. In this, she's shown here riding mules that are pulling the canal boats. The position was one that was very difficult. The work was hard, and several times Garfield fell into the water. He seems to have caught malaria, and he only did this for a brief time in his career, but it made a very picturesque picture showing Garfield calmly pulling the canal boat on mules with, again, a lovely pastel setting for the scene. In the oil painting that Berninghaus did for the Bush family follows the same composition. Again, it's a little more finished. Some of the details are changed. The background is more farm-like rather than industrial, but the painting shows as well a moment in history in which the canals are making prosperity for the nation. Each of the paintings that Berninghaus did for this series, Lincoln in the log cabin with the rail splitting, shows fencing of property and the frontier being captured and converted to private property. The painting of Ulysses S. Grant showing the settlement of the West and roads being constructed, and Garfield's subject shows transportation and economic prosperity. Garfield was born in a log cabin, and it no longer exists, but there's a replica on the site that can be visited. The photograph on the right is a photograph of canal boats, and you can see that Berninghaus successfully portrayed the unique shape of the boats on the canal with their distinctive flat size and low contours, so they were able to go under bridges and very prominent curved foreground. The three paintings of Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, and James Garfield, showing these young men overcoming adversity, and that they're common people of the common classes, not aristocrats. They all have a Midwestern focus, which I think is significant both for Oscar Berninghaus and for his patrons of the Bush family. In looking at U.S. presidents, they are looking back somewhat, but not to the founding, but to the growth of the presidency and the origin of presidents coming from the Midwestern section of the United States. Grant specifically identifying with St. Louis, but Abraham Lincoln and Garfield coming from Kentucky, Illinois, Ohio, and showing that this region is producing men to lead the nation as well. They all also have a Civil War connection, and each of them had to confront issues of slavery, emancipation, issues of citizenship for black men, and each of them worked for greater recognition of rights for African Americans, although each had to overcome individual prejudices and stereotypes. But I think it's significant that Berninghaus, the Bush family, chose to make these examples of strong leaders whose individual character led them to success. Thank you.